Hey everybody, we're back on the sports betting podcast Bookends. We're at the beautiful Red Rock Racing Sportsbook. Jason, I'm Chucky. We're here to critique what happened in week one of pro football. Jay, first of all, it's great to be talking about week one. Week one's in the books. There was a lot of things that we were surprised at, maybe a few things that we weren't. All three rookie quarterbacks lost that we were, kind of talked about could be in for a rough road their first game. But let's just dive right into it. I mean, week one, who really surprised me was the Cleveland Browns. I thought there was a lot of hype about, Cincinnati and everything Baltimore did with Lamar Jackson. Pittsburgh was kind of that hot team that everybody was betting on in the offseason. And maybe Cleveland was kind of the forgotten team. Yet they came out, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, totally dominated $275 million man Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. The Browns were absolutely fantastic, not just in what they did, but in shutting down the Bengals. Obviously, Burrow didn't do a whole lot in the preseason with the calf injury, but we talked about it. We talked about it 2 weeks ago on Bookends that this Browns team has got something going on. Deshaun Watson only came back to play those 6 games last year. Now he's got the whole preseason ahead of him. They pick up Moore, pick up Tillman. They've got that receiving core, and now it's all on Nick Chubb, not splitting time with Hunt. And Cleveland's got something going there. Watson missed a lot of passes that were down the field. They actually had some open receivers. Marquise Goodwin opened down the field a couple times in that game. But what a stand-up effort by the defense. So
Phenomenal.
The Browns were awesome. Big surprise to go in and knock off the Bengals in that spot.
It's obvious for whatever reason, the scheme that they play, and new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, Joe Burrow's 1-5 versus the Cleveland Browns. So he really struggles against that defense. And T. Higgins, we talked about him in his contract year. He could be the kind of wide receiver target for teams that need a wide receiver. He was targeted 9 times. He had 0 catches in that game. So the Browns did a great job of really shutting down that high-flying Bengal offense.
My big surprise from week one is the Los Angeles Rams. Go up to Seattle and beat the Seattle Seahawks. I know a lot of people that killed them in their survivor pool didn't take the Ravens.
Right.
They didn't take the Commanders and tried to go with the Seahawks, and they lose that game. But for the Rams, and it was really an unknown team of Cooper Kupp is out.
Right.
Another reason to not like the Rams. So you got Higbee and Van Jefferson are maybe your 2 receivers to go to, and we see Puka Nacua come out of nowhere.
We had a bet if he could say it right, and he passed. He won.
Tutu Atwell has a great game. Kyler Williams comes out. Expected Cam Akers to be the lead back. So 3 guys play way over their heads. The Rams pull the upset. And not only did they do it on the offensive side of the football, but I think the yards in the second half were like 251 for the Rams and 3 for the Seahawks.
Right.
And this was a Seahawks team that was supposed to be competing for this division with the 49ers. So to come out and really not have a good game, Geno Smith didn't play well. The receiving core didn't do anything. They've got to travel to Detroit this weekend. So Seattle's going to have to catch things up pretty quickly. But congratulations to the Rams. Come out of the box with a big win. They have a very, very tough game this week with having to play the 49ers. But the Rams were the surprising team for me in week one.
Yeah, I agree. I think they totally dominated on both sides of the ball, and you wondered, what are they going to do? There was some rumblings in the offseason about teams that inquired about Matt Stafford, Aaron Donald. Would they trade him? Would they trade Cooper Kupp? They played without Kupp, but a lot of unknown guys really stepped up and dominated on both sides of the ball. I guess that shows you, though, Matt Stafford, he's won a Super Bowl. Sean McVay's won a Super Bowl, and maybe this Ram team's going to be a little bit better than what we thought.
Maybe the Seahawks are going to be a little bit worse than we thought. Yep. It's so difficult to say what we saw in this week one. We talked about the Packers and the Bears, and what did these teams really come across? Is Jordan Love the next coming? Can he be the guy that goes in there and replaces Aaron Rodgers? And I'm not sold on it yet. I don't know if Jordan Love is the
one game.
One game, he completed 14 passes. Several of those were big plays to the running backs out of the backfield. He wasn't playing with Christian Watson. Got the 2 touchdown passes to Dobbs. Some big catch by Luke Musgrave late in the game, but not sold that Love is a great quarterback because I didn't expect that Bears defense to be all that good to begin with. So he beat what we believe is a subpar Bears defense, and really the Bears offense, which we expected to be a little bit better, really did not play well. Fields did not play well, and when you go back and look through a lot of the tape and film of that game, you start to question what the Bears are doing in the coaching staff rooms and an offensive coordinator room because the play calling and the schemes of what the Bears are doing really fell flat.
The Bears now in 10-plus seasons against the Green Bay Packers. They went from 3-17 to 3-18 now, so not a lot has changed. let's shift gears a little bit and talk about like a team that we expected to be good that was good. And for me, it's the Dallas Cowboys on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you talk about a defense that we knew was going to be Super Bowl-esque coming into the season, but the way they dominated the Giants, 7 sacks, 3 interceptions, a fumble recovery, a shutout, a blocked field goal, that defense led by Micah Parsons, for me, was phenomenal. That's a good enough defense that they can win the Super Bowl. Now, granted, in the NFC, you have the 49ers and you have the Eagles, but that Cowboy defense is special. They love playing for Dan Quinn. They love that he came back. They're aggressive. They attack. They go after the ball. Diggs in the secondary, too. They are a talented bunch, and I think they're good enough to win the Super Bowl with that defense. Now, granted, Dak can't be a turnover machine like he was last year, but for me, it was that Dallas Cowboy defense that lived up to everything we talked about in the offseason.
Yeah, they embarrassed the New York Giants on Sunday night, and that's a New York Giants team that is a playoff hopeful team.
Right.
That's not like that's a bad New York Giants team. They're a 5.5-point favorite at Arizona this week, so they're expected to win some football games, but Dallas just goes and absolutely destroys them. For me, the standout team of the week, or the team that was supposed to be good that really proved they're good, I'm going to go back to the San Francisco 49ers.
Right.
This San Francisco 49er team obviously lost to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game when Brock Purdy goes down with the UCL tear. The offseason is who's going to be their quarterback. Is Brock Purdy going to be back to be their quarterback? And they go into Pittsburgh, and again, this Pittsburgh Steelers team that's hopeful of being able to make a playoffs. A lot of chatter in the offseason about how good they were going to be. The preseason for the Steelers was fantastic. They were able to move the ball up and down the field, and the Niners go in there and just absolutely demolish them. Ayuk has 2 touchdowns. McCaffrey has a great game.
Right.
The defense stands up, and it's no coincidence that we talk about Dallas and then San Francisco, and you see Dallas as a 9.5-point favorite over the Jets this week, and the Niners an 8.5 to 9-point favorite over the Rams. So those were the 2 impressive teams, and that's why you see that line skew so much more, and let alone the fact that Dallas gets to play the Jets now with Zach Wilson, going to have to make that trip. So we saw that Dallas defense embarrass Daniel Jones, and now this Jet team, obviously coming off the win, what they did on the defensive side of the football, and the special teams side of the football, but offensively, Jets are going to be very, very challenged this week to head into Dallas.
Right. Well, the Jets have a really good defense, too. That game could be, can Zach Wilson... They won 8 games with Zach Wilson last year, so can they do enough offensively with Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall to kind of muster any kind of offense to stay in that game? But I think getting back to what you said with Pittsburgh, that was a clear game of pros versus the Joes. The public was clearly on the 49ers. The sharp money clearly came in on the Steelers in the first half. And in the game, as we saw that game start to trickle down somewhat, they were dead wrong on that game. Now they're playing without Freiermuth, and it looks like Deontay Johnson in their next game on Monday night against Cleveland. So really some injuries there on offense too. And I thought Kenny Pickett, for all the kind of steps he made forward in the preseason, really looked kind of out of sorts that game against the 49er defense.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about it. That's going to be a Monday night matchup, again, with this Browns defense that did a great job of controlling the Bengals. We'll see if they can go in there and do the same to the Steelers.
So let's look at a couple of quarterbacks now that really kind of disappointed and didn't live up to expectations. There's probably about a half a dozen of those guys. For me, I guess it's Joe Burrow a little bit. He did start off really slow last year. I think they were 0-2 out of the gate. He didn't put big numbers up. You could tell that he had some rust. He missed the entire preseason. I know it was raining. It's against that Cleveland defense that he has not played well against. So maybe he's got a little bit of a mulligan there because of that. This week they play at home against Baltimore. He has lit up the Ravens over the last couple of years. But for me, it was Justin Fields. You heard about this Bear offense now adding DJ Moore. We talked about on previous shows when the Eagles added A.J. Brown for Jalen Hurts, that offense took off. When the Bills added Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen, that offense took off. Only 2 targets for DJ Moore. The touchdown came by Darnell Mooney in that game. I thought that Bear offense, he only looked downfield, I think, once, one pass of over 10 yards. They just looked completely out of sync. I don't get it. I mean, if you have a young quarterback, you've gotten him some new weapons. I think he's a guy that probably needed to play more in the preseason. I know that the league has gotten away from that. You don't want to get your stars hurt, but you could just tell that offense wasn't in sync yet. And with a really young kind of defense that is lacking talent, this offense needs to score some points. and they're not going to win games the way they played against the Packers.
Well, it seems like the Bears thought that the screen pass was going to be the fix-all way
it worked
to
in the
score
preseason,
points
if you
in the
remember.
offseason, and the Packers had the screen pass covered, and the Bears weren't able to throw the ball down the field. And if we continue to talk about the Bears games, we could probably spend 30 to 45 minutes of us crying and pouting about the consistent Bears performances. For me, the quarterback, when we talk about whether it was Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, those were three guys, especially from a fantasy standpoint, that were drafted very early in drafts that all had really subpar weeks. With all due respect to Josh Allen, the turnovers were absolutely terrible, but I didn't have high expectations for Josh Allen in week one because the Jets have consistently owned him over the last 2.5 years. They've really stymied him. They've been able to control Diggs. So I wasn't expecting a big game from Allen. Where I was a little bit more shocked was in Lamar Jackson. And I know they were taking on the Texans where you can run the ball a little bit. But with the offensive coordinator change, the whole moniker all preseason was that they were going to find Zay Jones, they were going to find Odell Beckham Jr., they were going to find Bateman. Lamar Jackson was throw the ball over the field. I know Mark Andrews didn't play in the game.
I think that was a big part of it.
And obviously J.K. Dobbins goes hurt, but you get the rushing touchdowns twice from Justice Hill. But I still didn't see anything in the passing game from the Ravens. It doesn't look good. I mean, he had some connections to Zay Flowers. I think he had an interception. He also had a fumble. So for me, Lamar Jackson was really the disappointment of week one in getting the win, but not being able to put up the big fantasy points. And now you said it. Both of those guys, Burrow and Jackson, head into week two playing each other in a game that should be pretty high scoring because these secondaries for both the Ravens and the Bengals, I'm not sold that either of them are very, very good, and we'll look for big bounce back games from Burrow and Jackson here, as well as Allen, because Allen should have the big bounce back game against the Raiders with the Raiders coming to town.
Well, yeah, for the Raiders, it's back-to-back road games, and I think when you look at Allen, I am a little concerned. I know we're going to talk about all the games, but I think in Allen's case, you look at a guy last year that had so many turnovers in the red zone, more than any other quarterback, especially during the second half of the season. It really came down to ball protection on Monday night. When they went into the second half of that game without Aaron Rodgers, I didn't think there was any way that the Bills were going to lose that game. There's just no way they're going to lose except if they turn the ball over. And that's what they did. And ultimately, his performance cost them the game on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think that Jet defense is really good. Yeah. And I think we're going to see that as a consistent theme to Jets football games, obviously the rest of the year. That defense has got to play exceptional for them to win, and hope that the offense can muster some points and doesn't turn the ball over to stay in games.
So we're going to jump into some of the games now, some of the key games for this week that we want to kind of highlight and critique a little bit. So Thursday night football, Eagles Vikings. Eagles, they won the game against the Patriots. Patriots outgained them by over 175 yards. They had the defensive score by Darius Slay. Really thought the second half of that game, the Patriots were in control of that game. They had an opportunity for the late 2-point conversion that was called back. They ended up winning by 5, not 3, which was really good for you guys, not our side of the counter. But the Eagles showed some rust to me in that game. The Vikings, on the other hand, were beat by Tampa Bay. So, I mean, you talk about the Vikings right now, who they've got the high-powered offense of Jordan Addison and Jefferson and Matson and Osborne. They really struggled against Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay, yet the number has started to trickle down a little bit. We've seen some sharp play come in on the Vikings, plus the points in this one.
Yeah, it was. That could have been one of the big surprises of the week was Tampa Bay. I don't know if it was more that I was surprised in Tampa Bay, or it was less the Vikings didn't do a very good job. They threw the ball all over the field on the Bucs. Cousins had 334 yards passing. Justin Jefferson had 150 yards receiving. But it was the turnovers that killed the Vikings with 2 interceptions, and I think they also had a fumble in there. And you just can't do that in today's NFL. And if you're going to turn the ball over 3 times, the other team's most likely going to beat you. So that's what they have to stop here in heading to Philadelphia. That was what killed the Patriots early in that game, was the turnovers for the Eagles. And then the one thing we know about the Eagles is if you get down to the Eagles early, they're going to run the ball down your throat. They're not going to throw it around a bunch. They're going to run the ball, take the time off the clock, and that's how they're going to beat you. So they kind of hung on and survived against the Patriots. I do think Minnesota has the ability to go play with anyone because of their talent in that receiving core, but Cousins cannot have the turnovers. And, heading to Philadelphia is not an easy task on anybody yet, let alone an indoor team like Minnesota, likes playing indoors, now heading to Philadelphia.
Weather shouldn't be a factor, though, so it's early in the season. I think you look at Philly, and it looks like Gainwell might miss this game. DeAndre Swift only, I think, had 3 carries. Rashad Penny was inactive. He'll probably be active this week. So kind of curious to see from a fantasy side of it if Swift or Penny or Boston Scott kind of leads the way for Philly this week.
Yeah, and both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith were, good, not great, but good in their game. And again, when the Eagles play at home, it's a tough bet against. And if you're going to take the Vikings, make sure you get that touchdown. Don't get anything less than a touchdown.
So now we're going to talk about an AFC matchup between our Raiders and the Buffalo Bills. The Raiders are the only team that won a game in the AFC West. They currently sit in first place. We know as far as the odds went, they were the 4th choice of the 4 teams to win their division, 4th choice in the conference, and to win the Super Bowl, all from the AFC West. They did what they had to do, the Raiders, against the Broncos. I thought Jimmy Garoppolo was really efficient. Josh Jacobs, you could still see he had some rust on. Jacoby Myers stepped up, played a great game. We touched on the Bills a little bit, how poorly Josh Allen played. It was a game they should have dominated. They're almost double-digit favorites here. It's a game Buffalo needs to win. And for the Raiders, if they somehow can get a win here, they'd be 2-0 on the road. But a tough place to go play in Buffalo. But you'd rather play in Buffalo now than in December.
Well, it's your first place Las Vegas
That's
Raiders
what I said,
with
first
watching
place, yep.
the Broncos and the Chiefs and Chargers all go down. So relish this at this point. But this is a tough ask to go to Denver and then head to Buffalo back-to-back weeks. I wasn't overly impressed with what the Raiders did. I was actually, in watching that game, more disappointed in what I saw of the Broncos. Expecting the coaching change, to see a better Broncos offense, to see a better Broncos coach team.
Right.
They opened the game with the onside kick, which they don't get. We saw absolutely no pass rush from that Denver Broncos front. Jimmy Garoppolo had all day to do whatever he wants. He's not going to get that against Buffalo. Buffalo is going to rush the quarterback, and they're going to be able to get to the quarterback, as Jimmy G is not a guy that's, we'll call it, fleet of foot, despite the fact that he, salted that game with the big third down run to get the first down. But this isn't a good spot for the Raiders. But again, Devontae Adams, you never know what can happen. But this will be the number 1 pick in everybody's survivor pool.
Right.
We'll be taking the Bills this week to beat the Raiders, with them being close to that 10-point favorite.
It really becomes a must game for Buffalo, too. I don't think in that division you can fall behind and go 0-2, and when you're such a big favorite at home.
It is the short week. They are coming off
yep.
the Monday night, so some optimism.
But a lot of travel
for
the Raiders, back-to-back road games and coming back to the East Coast. What I think is one of the 2 marquee games of the week, and that's Kansas City against Jacksonville. Jacksonville did what they had to in the second half, won that game last week against Indy. You look at Kansas City, they were definitely out of sync without Kelsey in that game. We're still looking to see who's going to step up and be the number 1 wide receiver. They have a lot of young, talented wideouts, but can any of these guys really step up and be the guy after they traded Tyreek Hill last year? So that offense was struggling a little bit. Kelsey has practiced. It looked like he's back. He's going to play. That number has started to trickle up just a little bit right now. My guess is we're going to be huge Jags fans when this game kicks off on Sunday. But I think it's a great matchup for these 2 teams.
Yeah, the big deal for the Chiefs is obviously getting Kelsey back,
right.
and again, missing guys on the defensive side of the football. But I don't think we can see Kadarius Toney be as bad as he was in that week 1. They get the extra rest from playing in the Thursday night opener, and expect the Chiefs are the big effort here. We saw Jacksonville play what we would guess is an inferior talent with the Indianapolis Colts to what they're going to see. But the most optimistic thing coming out of Jacksonville was the way Calvin Ridley looked. He looked absolutely fantastic with a year-plus layoff. He looked like the receiver that he was with the Atlanta Falcons. So those of you that have Calvin Ridley, those of you that are Jaguars fans, I think there's a lot of excitement there on that offense with Etienne and Bigsby to go with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. Calvin Ridley just going to spread that field out. And so Trevor Lawrence has got a lot of weapons.
He does.
And Jacksonville can put up a lot of points. And so this could be a track meet with these teams kind of trading scores.
Well, we talked about earlier about what A.J. Brown meant to Jalen Hurts, what Stephon Diggs meant to Josh Allen. And I know we talked a little bit about DJ Moore and Justin Fields, but maybe really it's going to be Calvin Ridley and Trevor Lawrence that he takes that offense to the next level. Another game we want to look at is the Green Bay Packers and Atlanta Falcons. I know we spent a lot of time talking about Jordan Love and what he did in game 1, but on the flip side, we talk about Atlanta a little bit. They've got a young quarterback in Desmond Ridder as well, and their offense with a lot of young talent. Robinson, Pitts, Drake London. Pitts had 2 receptions. Drake London had 0 receptions in that game. They still beat Carolina 14-0. A lot of it was their defense and the fact that both Allgeier and Bijan Robinson could run the ball a little bit, but a little worried about Ritter as well. This game opened around 1 Green Bay. It trickled up to 2. We've started to see some late money come back a little bit on Atlanta, but I'm worried about that Atlanta offense with Desmond Ritter just a bit.
Yeah, I don't know what we can make a judgment on either of these two teams after week 1. I think the Packers got the gift of playing a Bears team that wasn't ready to go, didn't give a full effort in it, didn't really get to evaluate Jordan Love, and especially with Christian Watson not there as well, I still don't know what the Green Bay Packers are. And Atlanta, as much as we knew it was going to be a running dominance, we didn't know it was going to be Tyler Algier kind of taking the running dominance away from the big draft pick and Bijan Robinson. Ritter did not look good, but again, they were playing the Carolina Panthers, and Ritter didn't have to do too much, and they could run the football. We still expect London to be that top guy, Drake London to be their receiver. Pitts is going to be solid.
Bijan was a number 1 pick in fantasy.
I'm not sold on to what's going on in this game. I don't know that the Packers should be favored heading into Atlanta because I think that over-evaluation on the Packers was beating a Bears team that didn't put much of an effort in.
I think it's a little bit of a product of Atlanta, the way they looked. I know they beat Carolina by 2 touchdowns, but Carolina was in that game. They had some bad turnovers in that game that were deep. I didn't think Atlanta did anything outside of the running game to show that they could compete with the offense of the Green Bay Packers. Another game on Sunday, which would have been maybe the best game of the day, and that's Jets-Cowboys. I know we touched on it a little bit. It is going to be Zach Wilson. We know that Aaron Rodgers is out for the year. It's interesting because prior to Monday night, the Dallas Cowboys were 3.5-point favorites against the New York Jets. After the game and after the injury, they were 9.5-point favorites. So kind of a huge adjustment there. Zach Wilson did win 8 games for the Jets last year. They've got a great defense. They've got really good young skill position players in Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. But Zach Wilson, can he do enough against that Cowboy defense that we touched on earlier that was so dominant against Daniel Jones and New York Giants?
Well, when the Jets watched film of the Dallas Cowboys last week against the Giants, they're not going to feel comfortable going with Zach Wilson into Dallas. That's going to be a scary situation. They're going to have to find some unique plays and some time for Zach Wilson to be able to get the ball out. He wasn't able to find Garrett Wilson a whole lot. Got him on the touchdown pass, an incredible catch by Wilson. But Zach Wilson really didn't do much in that time. Now, again, Aaron Rodgers was getting all those first-team snaps. He was getting all the preparation. So maybe with a week of preparation, they're able to do a little bit more, get Zach Wilson a little bit more into the game plan. And everything we saw out of Dallas is kind of what we expected to see. We really didn't see Dallas offense have to do too much because they had dominated on the defensive side of the football. But Tony Pollard taking the lead back role without Zeke there looked absolutely fantastic. Dak didn't turn the ball over. So this is another spot of, can that Jet defense stand up
They're
tall
going to have
enough to not let Dallas blow them out?
I think the one big difference is that really helped Zach Wilson was that Breece Hall had such a big game. I think 7 carries, 129 yards. He almost broke that 90-plus yard run. He's not going to have that running room against the Cowboys. So it really is going to fall on the shoulders of Zach Wilson to be able to move this team downfield and get some first downs through the air. They're not going to be able to run against the Cowboys. Yeah. Even with Cook, Carter, and Breece Hall, I just don't see that being a success point for them.
Yeah, and the Jets stole one on Monday night.
Right.
They stole the game. So this is if they don't win this one, they're still optimistic about where they're at 1-1, and we'll see what they end up doing at the quarterback position, if they truly stick with Zach Wilson as their number 1 starter, or if they're going to go try and find that quarterback that's out there.
I wonder if there's a certain number 12 whose phone might be ringing. I don't know. But.
I mean, you talk about guys that are out there of Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan, and obviously making a trade piece to pick somebody else up. But
does that flip the script if you get a Carson Wentz or a Matt Ryan? I mean, don't you? I mean, for that team, and they're built to win the Super Bowl today. We knew that they had a smaller window with Aaron Rodgers, that maybe a 2-year window to get there. We figured with that defense and skill position, I think they need more of a guy who, like number 12. I don't know if they're going to make that move.
You're 100% right. It's going to be tough to go through this year and say we're going to stick with Zach Wilson when you just went out and got Aaron Rodgers because he wasn't the guy, and then you set Mike White. And send him back, and because you didn't want to have those 3 quarterbacks in the room. So I think the Jets are in an interesting position. They're gonna publicly back Zach Wilson.
Absolutely.
And we'll see what they do on the outside of things to try and bring somebody in that can maybe be a little bit better.
Don't forget, a few years ago, he was the number 2 overall pick. He had a phenomenal year, his final year of college at BYU, and he did start 8 games last year, or they were able to win 8 games with him last year. So he's got the tools. It's just, can that translate to on the field?
Can he last the 5 or 6 weeks until Kyler Murray is ready for the Arizona Cardinals, and then Kyler Murray ends up with the Jets, as we know that Arizona's interested in that number 1 pick of Caleb Williams?
Well, just remember,
or is there a Colt McCoy out there
maybe
that ends up going to the Jets? I don't know if he's better than Zach Wilson or not, but the Kyler Murray question has me, my head spinning a little bit.
Just remember one thing, that because Aaron Rodgers didn't play the 65% of the snaps, that would have given Green Bay a number 1 pick next year. It's a number 2 pick. So the Jets still sit now with that number 1 pick if they were to look for something like a Kyler Murray. Let's look at Monday Night Football now. Love it. The first of 2 straight weeks of Monday night double headers. Panthers, Saints, Monday Night Football.
Well, thank God we do have a double header this week, because I don't know how many people want to get out there and watch the Saints and the Panthers. The secondary game of obviously the Browns and the Steelers, I think, is the one that everybody that's going to be tuned into that has 1 TV. If you have 2 TVs or a monster video wall in here, come watch the Saints and the Panthers play. But we talked about those rookie quarterbacks were 0-3.
Right.
We talked about that the head coaches, the brand new head coaches, were 0-5,
And Richardson plays Stroud this week.
So we do have a rookie quarterback that'll get a win. And I did hear on the radio coming in this morning, I didn't fact check this at all, but I heard it was the first time in NFL history that the Browns, Jags, Raiders, and Lions all won in the same week. So again, we're all seeing the bad teams do something special. But again, Browns Steelers for me, absolutely incredible Monday night game. We got one team 1-0, one team 0-1. They don't like each other. They split their season last year. We'll see if that Browns defense is for real, and the Steelers to get back up after getting beat down by San Francisco. And you talk about the Saints, Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers didn't really show much against the Falcons. We saw the Saints team squeak by the Titans, allowed the Titans to kind of really go up and down the field, settle for a bunch of field goals. But we saw Tannehill turn the ball over in some really, really bad turnovers. Not so much that the Saints were making him make the turnover, but he made some really, really bad passes to get there. And the Panthers, they're going to have to find something. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if Miles Sanders or Adam Thielen or Mingo, but I don't know what they have on the offensive side of the football that is going to threaten any of these other teams. And the Saints do have a lot of different weapons, and we do know that Carr looks to throw the ball down the field. And so that's why you see them a favorite on the road here. But I think we're going to be asking ourselves for several weeks is who are the Carolina Panthers, and can they cover a football game?
Well, I think when you look at the Panthers, they've also suffered a lot of injuries. That offensive line was, decimated week 1 in injuries. And I think it's going to be tough for that team, especially against the Saints defense. And when you look at that Steelers-Brown game, this is back-to-back home games for them. They can start the season 0-2 at home, which I think would be devastating. They don't have Deontay Johnson. Not sure about Freiermuth here. I really think Kenny Pickett needs to step up, have a much better game here, because to lose your first 2 games at home, the schedule makers really have put them behind the 8 ball if that's the case, because now they only have 6 home games left.
And I know we talked about the Monday night, but one game I want to go back to, we talk about, the Tua and the Dolphins going into L.A., a very high-scoring game against the Chargers. Was really one of the best games of the weekend, with watching these teams go back and forth on each other. Herbert had a decent game. Josh Kelly came out of nowhere, kind of to split time with Austin Eckler to have a good game. But the question is can Tua really lead this team? When we talked about it, I want to go back 3 weeks on bookends, and we talked about Hill and Waddle being really the best receiving core partnership in the NFL, and 2 guys that were going number 1 and number 2 in fantasy drafts. And Tua was slipping down to the 10th or 11th quarterback being drafted because of his injury proneness. And we said, if Tua's healthy,
that's still a concern, though.
But when he's healthy, he's a top 5 quarterback. And we saw that this past week. He puts up monster yards. You're able to hook him up Tua to Hill. You would crush somebody in fantasy. And now they go to New England, where the Patriots played a really, really good game, hung in there with Philadelphia at home, and now can Miami go do this on the road once again? And they take so many shots down the field.
They do.
So many deep shots down the field. And Hill was just electric in San Diego. we'll see. This is an interesting game, a short favorite for the Dolphins, but really, really not surprised that Tua Tagovailoa can go put up these type of numbers just because of the talent that he's surrounded in that Miami offense.
Hill was so far behind the Chargers defense that he was in San Diego, not LA. So, but I think you look at this game, and similar to the Steelers, the Patriots back-to-back home games. So it's so important that they can win this game in that division. If the Dolphins get out to 2-0, Patriots would be 0-2. We know the Bills lost a game. And then with the struggles of the Jets at quarterback, this is a Dolphin team that there's some value, I think, on the future book odds to look at this team. And there still is a lot of chatter about a certain running back in Indianapolis that the Dolphins love, and that's Jonathan Taylor. So as they continue to have some of this success, the injury to Rodgers, and maybe some of the offensive struggles with the Bills and Josh Allen, don't be surprised if the Dolphins don't revisit this before the trade deadline and see if they could pick up Jonathan Taylor. Before we leave you guys, though, don't forget, get signed up for SDN Sports. With all the games going on, we're not that far. We were just talking about the Golden Knights who start at the end of the month. So hockey's right around the corner. It's a great time. We still have that bonus going on. But last man standing. It was really a phenomenal first week. Pro football last man standing where we guarantee $150,000. We had 63-24 entries, almost 50% knocked out in week one, 32-72 left. And in college where we guarantee $100,000, 32-23 entries, only 18-27 left. So in both contests, not quite 50%, but a pretty good, cut after week one.
Yeah, and again, guaranteed 150 in the pro, 100,000 in the college. Saw a good amount of people chopped out. The college slate this week's a little bit soft, not a lot of top 25 matchups. We do have the smartest team in the SEC in Vanderbilt traveling out to Las Vegas this week to take on the Rebels in their home opener. Vanderbilt a short favorite over the Rebels. Obviously UNLV didn't put up a lot of points at Michigan as we didn't expect, but this should be a good fun game to watch and potentially a chance for a Rebel team to go beat an SEC team, which you don't get to say that very often.
See if their offense is for real or not. Two games that I want to touch on that are lopsided, and one is Hawaii and Oregon, and one is Colorado State. Hawaii's a huge underdog to Oregon. Oregon's a big favorite there, and you look at Colorado and the hype train and Dion, who's over a 3-touchdown favorite against Colorado State. If both those two schools win, they'd be 3-0. They set up Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes at Oregon and the Ducks next week. Now, that's a marquee game that I think will generate tremendous handle, and I think the early line we're looking at is Oregon somewhere, depending on what happens this week, around a 16-point favorite against the Buffaloes.
Yeah, this Colorado team, obviously the upset win at TCU, they beat Nebraska this week, and they're 3-touchdown favorite over Colorado State. But one of the things that has me intrigued is that, Dion Primetime continues to push his guys in his press conferences for Heisman trophies. He talks about Hunter, even brings up his son. And they've been putting up some big yards and big numbers. And I don't think that they're going to just stand pat and try and beat Colorado State. If they have a chance to run things up, if they have a chance to score a lot of points,
interstate rival, recruiting,
I think they're going to continue to try to push the envelope and score a ton of points. So look out Colorado State, and we'll see if they can hang in there with the Buffaloes.
They do have a much tougher schedule as you move forward after this week. But if they both are undefeated, I have to think that Oregon-Colorado game a week from now is going to be just a phenomenal game.
Monster handle.
Definitely a monster handle. Well, guys, we love when you guys come out and enjoy everything we have to offer, not only here at Red Rock, but all of our racing sports books. But again, don't forget, get signed up for SDN Mobile. We have that bonus going on, and we look forward to seeing you guys. It's fun that football's here for us. Great crowds in the room. The excitement was electric. The noise and the atmosphere from our department echoes throughout the casino. So always fun when football rolls around. For Jason, I'm Tucky. We'll see you guys next week on the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends.